But I really don't have any regrets. I really don't. I've lived exactly how I've wanted to. I've tried my hardest every single time. I didn't win the matches that maybe I should have always won, but I really gave it my all. So that for me is enough.
Hello everybody, welcome back to The Body Serve. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm James.
This is episode 120. And on this episode, we're going to be talking about Nadal's masterful return to tennis after having not played much at all this year. He won in Monte Carlo. We'll be talking about Jared...
Shania Twain. No, we won't. Never again, in fact.
Listen, you've been on your high horse with Shania Twain with this Donald Trump thing since it's happened.
I have.
It's like you were...
I have. You know why? Because I never liked her ass, like not once. And then she went on Drag Race and did a piss poor job. Mm-hmm. And one of the queens like poured her heart out to Shania, and Shania was like, okay, thanks.
You know, those things may be true, but I will not have you pretend like you are above us all. Because you've been out here standing privately for Kanye West in spite of everything for years. Okay?
Not since the trip to Trump Tower. Actually, since the Kardashian marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but still, it's like, well, you know, Kanye's still a genius. There's always that undertone, right? No, you haven't been writing him off the way I have, and I haven't been throwing that in your face. But know that Shania is out here acting a fool. You're because the
sad thing is
the issue here too is that I grew up liking Shania Twain. You've always held that against me, always.
I mean, she is mainly responsible for Taylor Swift, so, like, do with that what you will. The thing about Kanye is that he is a once great artist who no longer has anything to say, and that's sad.
And I've always maintained that he was never that great, and that's been my perspective.
All right.
And he's gotten away with a lot of fuckery because people give him a free pass because they think he's that great.
He was.
We'll have to agree
But now
to
he's on
disagree.
Twitter tweeting out these banal... ninth grade philosophy tweets. It's not interesting.
The greatest thing he ever did was to load up George Bush back in the day. Since then...
We're very far from that.
Exactly. Like the Taylor Swift Beyonce thing, that was rude as fuck and totally out of line. And
I rather enjoyed that.
No, but screw him for making me feel somewhat like I'm on Taylor Swift's side. Just even 5%.
That's crazy because I've never felt that emotion. Anyway, we're here to talk about tennis. This is a tennis podcast.
Yeah, and okay, so there's Nadal. We're going to be talking about him. We're going to be talking about Jared Donaldson. That madness that happened.
I can't even take it that seriously.
It feels like it was 2 weeks ago. The Donaldson stuff, the Caroline Wozniacki interview that she gave, which we will be getting into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yet again at a tennis tournament where these on-court advertising is fucking up players' lives. Thanasi Kokkinakis is the latest one who's leaving the Monte Carlo site on crutches because of these, what do you even call them? These little cushion things.
Bollards or bumpers or whatever.
We saw so many GIFs of players tumbling over them. Zverev
picked it up and launched it across the court.
I mean, so we'll see what happened there in a bit. We have a few words for Darko Grncarov.
If that is your real name.
Let's start at the top with Rafael Nadal. Rafa has been gone for a while, right? He played and made the quarterfinals, I believe, in Australia, and then had to retire mid-match. Tried to come back in Acapulco, couldn't quite get on court because he had a recurrence of the same injury. Finally came back at Davis Cup, and we saw him turn in a comprehensive win against Alex Zverev in best of 5 sets. Mm-hmm. And so he shows up in Monte Carlo now, which has often been the start of his tour de force darling. You know, it's what really kicks his season into gear. It's the start of the red clay swing. And my God, did you expect what we saw this week?
Well, I expected a Nadal title, but I was surprised that he did so with so little in the way of resistance. He wasn't taken past 6-4 in any sets. He had, not an easy draw for the standard of players that are in the draw. He faced Thiem, who has beaten him on clay, and who's a big clay rival at this point. Dimitrov, Nishikori, who has completed a pretty impressive resurgence. He's been out for many, many months with injury, played some challengers, was just really grinding it out.
And more importantly, Nishikori is somebody who's pushed him on clay in the past.
Yes. This is a draw that was full of kind of dangerous players, not like players to be really scared of, but if he wasn't feeling 100%, it wasn't a foregone conclusion.
It's one thing to say that Nadal didn't really have much resistance. It's another thing to beat Team 6-love 6-2 and win the first 9 games of that match. And to reduce Team to having the crowd cheering for him winning a game in that second set.
And that was a team who had just beaten Novak Djokovic in what was a pretty good performance. I was impressed. I thought his game looks like it's coming together well on clay. He's just a complete player on this surface.
He was also coming back from injury as well. Mm-hmm. But the performance against Djokovic made it seem like he could have mustered a battle against Nadal.
Yeah. And I think team fans would have to see that match against Djokovic as encouraging, because we've seen a different Djokovic at this tournament. Team's backhand is amazing, as you know, but his forehand is just so great on the surface. He can do a lot of things with it. He can just whip it cross-court or inside out.
The thing about Team, and we saw it prior to that Nadal match, is he's able to generate incredible pace, and the type of pace from positions that would give Nadal problems. Mm-hmm. If you watch some of those highlights from his first few matches in Monte Carlo, he'd be hitting rifling winners stretched out wide on the backhand on the return. He'd be doing all sorts of things on court, to the point where if you're a Nadal fan, you watch that and it would give you a little bit of pause heading into that match. Mm-hmm. But then again...
Well, so what does it take to beat Nadal on clay? One of those things is a backhand that can withstand the bounce and the pace that Nadal puts on the forehand.
It's a question that I've been thinking about a lot this week. And the person who's come closest to beating him on a semi-consistent basis on clay, meaning winning a few matches, or at Roland Garros playing tough 4 or 5 set matches against him, is Djokovic. And that was Djokovic in his absolute prime. That was Djokovic, who was a human backboard, who could run down any ball, turn a hopeless position in a rally into a position of strength.
And who was not cowed by the pace on his forehand, who had a backhand among the best, a down-the-line backhand among the best ever, that could withstand Nadal.
If you go into a match with Nadal at his best, trying to figure out the match based on X's and O's, that's where you're going to get in trouble, I feel. Yeah. It was somebody like Novak who believed in himself that he could beat Rafa, was entirely comfortable on the clay, had every shot in the book. And what we see now with Nadal, incredibly, after having all this time off and coming back in his first match, it's like he never left. There's just something so comforting about the surface for him that just has his game functioning on so many levels.
Right, and I think it's the reason a lot of people can look at his performances on clay over the years and say, oh, well, that's just Rafa on clay. And sort of look past the endless hours of work and skill that goes into doing what he does and the athleticism, because he makes it look easy and routine when this is something that should be absurd. No player should be able to sustain these kind of performances on one surface.
Rafa generates incredible bounce on his shots on clay. And the spin that he's able to put on the ball gets a little bit of oomph from the surface, right? That's a given. But what he does so well is he mixes pace, trajectory of the ball, angles so incredibly well. Like you could get into a smash fest with a Dominic team where you're just bashing the ball off both wings, and Dominic could probably take him. But then what about when Nadal is casually rallying cross-court backhand to team's forehand, and then he pulls that backhand a little bit shorter, a little bit more wide, and you think that you have the down-the-line forehand set up, and Rafa is there in a flash to go down the line, to pass, to go cross-court, to do whatever. The trouble with playing Nadal is that you never really have him. You never really have him beat in any point. And the shot that for me, especially in the last couple of years, has served him so well on all surfaces, but especially on clays, that cross-court backhand.
Yeah.
The angles that he's able to generate with that to set up the forehand, it's mesmerizing to watch. Because when Nadal is at his best, he's not relying exclusively on his forehand. It will be most oftentimes will be the kill shot, but it's everything else that comes beforehand that sets it up. He beat Bedene in his first match, Khachanov in the second, Thiem, then he beats Dimitrov. I read an article by Steve Tenier saying that Dimitrov played some of the best tennis of his life in the first 3 games against Rafa and still found himself down love 3. And that kind of encapsulates what it's like to play him on that surface when he's going full throttle. And then in the final, he beats Nishikori. And let me tell you, I am so happy to have Clay back.
Clay K?
Well, I'm happy to have Clay back and also Clay K.
Yeah. So K has been out in the wilderness for a while. He pulled out of a bunch of tournaments last year with injuries. He made it through a few challengers this year. And I admire the way that he's fought himself back into the game. He wasn't looking for wild cards everywhere. He wanted to get match play.
Are you being shady there?
No. I'm really not.
Okay.
There's an integrity, but also I think a tennis intelligence about playing lower level tournaments and just trying to get matches. And the K that we know is maybe not entirely back, but he's close. He's out here taking the ball early like he always does, returning with interest.
Played a hell of a match to beat Zverev in the semifinal.
Yes. That was a humdinger after losing the first set.
Is it possible that the gap between Rafa and everybody else on clay is bigger than it's ever been?
I don't know. I feel like we say that every year.
I've never said that. I've never said that. This is a new thought to me.
Well, it's a strange phenomenon to even entertain at the age of 31. But people have been saying it about Roger last year at the majors. I don't know. I'm not sure what to measure it against because some of his chief rivals are either diminished or not here. So I think if Djokovic were at his fighting best, things might look quite different.
Or even Andy Murray.
Yeah. Andy Murray, who it turns out is quite accomplished on clay and can challenge the very best.
He had reached the zenith of his career in clay.
The zenith? Wow.
Thus far. Like, that was the apex of his clay play before injuries took a toll on him, right? It felt like his story had not been entirely written as far as his possibilities on the surface. And so he's not present at this point. He's on the entry list for Roland Garros.
I read that he was setting his sights on Washington as a possible return. He's entered Washington as well. So I think he probably is not sure yet where he's going to be ready. Stan Wawrinka is entered in Madrid.
Who is another big-time clay opponent.
A former Roland Garros champion.
Last year's final notwithstanding.
Sure. But Novak Djokovic is probably the other big story coming out of Monte Carlo. His performance was worlds apart from Indian Wells in Miami. He's back with Marian Vida, which is huge. He seems happy, the whole team. It seems like peace has returned to the Djokovic camp. Everyone is feeling good, and I'm not surprised that he's starting to play better.
He's also saying that he's pain-free for the first time in 2 years. That has something to do with it as well.
And imagine the weight that takes off you mentally as well.
He showed up and beat Lajovic 6-1, 6-love or something like that?
I was like, okay, I'm scared of you.
And then he plays Borna Coric, who has had a very good year, who talked with, I believe it was Reem Abelil, about how he took for granted that his progress would naturally happen after having some success as a teenager, and that he's had to go back to the proverbial drawing board to really kickstart his career again, to put the work in, and he's shown and reaped the benefits of that this year. So that was a tough out for Djokovic.
And clay is Coric's best surface. And he's been playing well on hard courts as well.
He's one of the few young guys who's beaten pretty much all the top guys.
Mhm.
He has a pedigree.
So I think Novak is doing a lot of things well and almost everything better than he did in the hard court swing in North America. He seems his movement is kind of getting together. His strokes look good. Maybe just kind of getting that court sense back and playing with a little more aggression. But Dominic is just, I mean, he's just too good on the surface right now for Djokovic to beat him at this point, like at this stage in his comeback.
There's so many variables, tennis being such a sport of matchups, for me to make any definitive sense of Djokovic losing to Thiem in a tough match and then Thiem being blown up by Nadal in that fashion. Like,
Right.
what do you make of all that?
Oh.
It's so difficult.
Well, wasn't it last year that a team finally beat Rafa and then got blown off the court by Djokovic in the following round? So this is something that his team does. And I wonder, over best of 5 sets, his strokes are quite an undertaking. You know, he puts a lot into every every stroke.
He puts his back into it.
He sure do. And I just wonder, clearly he's in very good shape, but is this a hindrance for him over long matches? And also he plays like 51 weeks a year.
This is also the challenge for anybody to beat Nadal on Philippe Chatrier. Because
you might win a set.
as
You might even
difficult
win
as
2.
it is to challenge him in these lead-up tournaments, it's that much more difficult to beat a fully healthy Nadal over 5 sets.
Mm.
That has to be one of the most daunting challenges in all of sport, historically.
Yeah. And it's reminiscent of beating Federer at Wimbledon or the US Open during his kind of imperial period. We saw Agassi work so hard to win 1 set, and that was it. It's like taking sets off Djokovic when he was in his dominant period.
Was that your portion where you're trying to assuage each fandom?
You know what? I'm over fandoms. I'm just bored by it.
You know what I'm bored by? And I was bored by it last year, and I'm bored by it again. Is this business of Nadal being inevitable on clay, and the extension of that being that the achievement just is not that impressive. I feel like we talked about this a lot after Roland Garros
Didn't
last
I just
year.
talk about it like 2 minutes ago?
Did you? Well, you know what? Maybe I'm not listening to you as much today.
Clearly
and
not.
now you know how it
Claro
feels.
que no.
Now you know. Just because we're not able to qualify somebody's performance in comparison to somebody else, that he's not being pushed by somebody to 5 sets, and you can't, just like I said, how do you make sense of that 6-love, 6-2 against Dominic Thiem?
Mm-hmm.
Is it Dominic playing poorly, Rafa being that great? It's far more difficult to assess that than it is to assess a 6-hour match between Nadal and Djokovic at the Australian Open.
Right.
And to then extrapolate and say, well, what does this mean about Nadal? What does this mean about Djokovic? And if your take on that is, well, it's just crazy to me that, okay, fine, Nadal is that great on clay, but that doesn't mean
it's
anything.
harder to explain. It as an observer, it's harder to say, well, 6-love, 6-2, the other guy just must not have shown up, right? Or it's the same thing when you see Serena win Grand Slam finals against Safina with the loss of like 3 games. You know, is it because the opponent just wasn't there, or is this player simply too good? Like, that's hard to understand.
And we've always gone to bat for Serena in that instance, and the WTA by extension. Because the narrative is that the WTA just isn't that good. There aren't enough rivals.
And that the champion's performance isn't super impressive because, like, what kind of resistance did he or she get, right?
Exactly.
I understand that mindset because the gaps between most professional level athletes are so small. And I think the mentality is really the deal breaker. It's, you know, it's a sports cliche, but like the mental strength is what creates Grand Slam champions. There's so many talented people who never won, but physically could do the job. So I think for me, if you're not a professional athlete or you haven't played at that level, the eye test is sometimes not enough.
It's not.
You know?
It absolutely is not.
Like, can I look at this person and say that's a Grand Slam champion, or they played at such a stunningly high level? I don't know. Like, I can say it, but do I have expertise?
I'm trying to get at there being a distinct double standard in the way that Nadal is often talked about on clay, as opposed to, say, if Federer is dominating on grass. Mm-hmm. It's you get Federer elevated to God status and comfortably, and people are happy to revel in him being so far and away better than anybody. But with Nadal on clay, it's taken almost like, okay, fine, you did that, but nobody really cares about clay. And that's something that
right.
That's been embedded in the history of tennis. Like, I remember growing up and thinking, well, nobody gives a fuck about clay. Like, when Agassi came back and won the French in 99, it was like, oh my god, he won a Grand Slam, but okay, taken against Sampras's other slams, it's not as impressive. And I think that's a distinct North American bias in terms of...
Well, Anglo-American bias, I would say.
Yes.
Because we see Wimbledon as the most prestigious of the Grand Slam championships, but nobody plays on grass anywhere.
No.
Aside from 3 weeks of the year.
And why is Wimbledon held in much more higher esteem as a surface, grass, in this day and age, when it's played on maybe a few courts for 1 month of the season?
In 3 or 4 different countries?
Yeah. There are more clay courts around the world than there are grass courts at this point.
And I love grass court tennis.
Yeah.
But I think there is this matter of aesthetics, that a lot of observers feel that clay tennis is just not beautiful. It's not artistic. It doesn't... I don't know.
Yeah, but if Federer were winning the French Open 5 years in a row, it would be seen as aesthetically pleasing and beautiful. You know, like what... I just don't understand this bias against clay. This is where I think it comes from. Because it's not new. It didn't start with Nadal. It started long before. And especially in the 90s, the surface and the tournament suffered from a string of so-called clay court specialist champions.
Yes. I think if you look at in the 90s who was winning, that's part of it. A lot of South Americans, Spanish speakers. There's a lot of, like, from the UK and the Western Hemisphere, from Canada and the US, there's a lot of, like, those countries. Mm-hmm. So it's in Spain, Portugal, Italy, like Southern Europe. Who cares about that? I think there's a bit of snobbery about clay because of who excels at it and just kind of what the surface looks like. It's not seen as literally pristine like grass tennis is.
This might be a good segue into talking about Jared Donaldson, because one of the defenses of Jared in the face of this meltdown that he had, and the defense of him as a person was, well, you know, unlike so many of the other Americans, he's actually made the effort to improve himself on clay. You know, and maybe that's why he was so frustrated in the moment that he's lost first round on a week-to-week basis in this clay swing, the early parts of it, and that's why he was so turned up. Because the pretext here is that Americans for a long time, and Pete Sampras is one of... If Pete Sampras was able to play and make a final and win a French Open, I feel like so much of this U.S. narrative of clay would have been so different.
Yes, and let's be clear, Chris Evert is the queen of Roland Garros.
Yes.
The greatest female clay court player in history. And some of her records on clay eclipse any man's record, Vilas, Nadal, Borg included. But lately, over the past,
20
years, the U.S. hasn't been making a lot of noise on clay outside of Serena.
And even that was later in her career, with the exception of 2002.
Right. So we were talking about Jared Donaldson, right?
Yes.
I don't want to get on my high horse about this because I find the whole thing kind of amusing.
You do?
But not in a way to, like, say, oh, boys will be boys, or let him off the hook. I just think it's ridiculous. Because Jared Donaldson, of all people, like, really? Like, Jared Donaldson. I thought he was like a little kitten. So what happened was he was questioning a mark he ended up being right. The umpire came down to check the mark, and Jared literally stepped to him, like squared up, got in his face, like was physically imposing.
And raised his voice to his face.
Yeah. So the umpire kind of poked Jared ever so softly in the chest to kind of like tell him, get out of my personal space. Like, you need to back up.
He was trying to calm him down.
Right.
To be clear.
Mind you, this is also the umpire who was bashed in the eyeball by Denis Shapovalov.
What has he done to deserve all this?
Like, I would be like, well, fuck next gen. It was, watching the video was insane. I was shocked.
Mm-hmm. The first thing that registers to me is an American behaving entitled and brash and, to be honest, rude and disrespectful as fuck overseas.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's
the
trope of the American overseas.
The ugly American.
The ugly American overseas is what first came to my mind.
And these are stereotypes that a lot of Americans want to keep telling us, this is not true. Why do you have to associate us with that? And why do you always have to default that this is a white American behaving this way? But why do they have to keep proving it?
And why?
Yeah.
Why?
You know?
Like, we've been told time and again, and a friend of the podcast, he's been on the show, Michael Lewis, he's meant just a few weeks before this happened, he was telling us about how he had such high hopes for Jared Donaldson. He's one of the good guys. And he may still be one of the good guys. But we have an instance here where one of the good guys is still behaving like this in this situation. So where are we left?
I know. So he may yet be one of the good guys, but I haven't heard a kind of an official statement or apology coming from the Donaldson camp.
His father was out on Twitter responding to Ben Rothenberg saying that, well, what do you think? What would you do if the umpire was coming at you like
the
that?
The umpire assaulted him, apparently.
That was a take.
It was illuminating.
It was certainly one way to look at the situation. I will tell you this, that I am to a fault a very even-keeled person in terms of being riled by things. It takes a lot to get me to that point. You know, where I have what's the term? Where
like to raise your ire, right?
Yes, okay. But one of the surest ways, historically in my life, is if somebody steps to me and gets in my face and raises the tone of their voice in an angry way, in an aggressive way. Mm-hmm. Like, I have no control of my response to that. Like, I will go from 0 to 1,000,000, not even 100, 0 to 1,000,000 in 30 seconds.
But
so watching that situation, come away with thinking, my God, that umpire exercised unbelievable restraint.
Mm-hmm. And the umpire's job is to de-escalate at all times, and he did that.
Yeah.
He did a good job. And you have to be prepared for emotional responses from athletes, but I can't even remember someone like Fabio Fognini like physically stepping into an umpire's space. Certainly he said reprehensible things, but this was surprising to me. So he was given a code violation, and after that he just descended into a fugue state.
He's getting ready to start play again. Then the umpire announces the violation. And he immediately goes, no, you've got something against me. Supervisor.
He's like, what did I do? I'm like, hun, just, you need to take a breath.
It was not a good look.
No, it was not a good look. And the dude bros out here are trying to make this a referendum on Hawkeye on clay, which I have to push back against, because that's not what this is. That is a conversation that we can have. We can certainly have it.
Should we have it? I think hasn't it all been proven that it's totally unreliable?
There is a margin of error.
Yeah. There's a reason why it's not on clay. It's not just because, this is clay court tennis.
I'm just saying, I'm making the concession. We can have that conversation.
Other people can have that conversation.
Yes, and maybe that conversation should be had. But that's not really what happened here.
No.
Because who's to say that somebody wouldn't get incensed about some other judgment call by an umpire, other than a ball mark, right? Like if you're going to react like that to a line call, you're going to react like that to other things as well. It speaks to maturity.
Yes, it speaks to, here's a big moralizing word here, decency. Like, you just don't interact with people like that. That's my bottom line.
Yeah. I don't even want to get that serious about it because I've watched the supervisor video like a million times and laughed every time.
Why can't we get it remixed?
Oh my God. Can you imagine if somebody remade Kelly Rowland's Commander with Supervisor instead?
God.
Oh my God, please. Another happening at Monte Carlo was Thanasi Kokkinakis in his first round tripped over that cushy advertising bollard or bumper, or whatever you want to call it, that was sitting on the court. So he fell over it. It was not a good fall. The video was circulating on social media. He continued the match, but after, he was walking around on crutches and then revealed that he suffered a hairline fracture on his kneecap.
And he's going to be out 2 months.
2 months for tripping on this piece of advertising on the court. So, the tournament director of Monte Carlo, Zeljko Franulovic, said, first of all, we're not responsible, which I think legally is something that he kind of has to say in anticipation of a potential lawsuit. He's not going to admit fault now, right?
Because Double Fault on Twitter was getting all the receipts.
Right.
This week.
Yeah.
It's crazy how many players had issues with these things.
Yes.
And it's one thing if they're there on a hard court, at the back of the court, outside of Nadal and Dominic. Like, maybe not that many people play that deep into the court. But on clay, it's clay.
Yes.
Everybody's playing, for the most part, far behind the baseline.
These are the biggest courts in tennis.
And the Monte Carlo one isn't even that big for a center court.
He said, Franulovic, the tournament director, said he could have also hit the fridge that is on the side or something else. I know we are totally within the rules. Sometimes even a player can trip and fall on the court itself. Can you...
Listen, I've played tennis and tripped over my left toe, my left foot.
No.
Like, you can trip over your own feet.
But
that's your fault.
That is disingenuous, is what it is.
I understand. I'm saying you can fall by yourself. You don't need all these other obstacles on the court.
The tournament director's rationale was that we were within the rules of where you can place obstructions on the court. It was all measured out. I want to challenge the rules, first of all. And the idea that somebody could fall is disingenuous because somebody could trip and fall over their own feet. They're not going to blame the tournament. This was something that was clearly an obstruction on the court that the tournament placed there with a sponsor's name on it.
It has no utility other than to get the
Right.
sponsor's name out there.
And so I understand that at this stage, you have to deny. You cannot take responsibility. You can't even apologize because that might open you up to liability, right? It's still disappointing. I think we can still complain about it. And the thing is, tennis players do not have an infrastructure through which they can stand up for player safety, right? The Players Association is toothless because it represents people like the director of Monte Carlo. There needs to be a priority placed on player safety, and I don't believe that will happen until there's a legitimately independent body that represents players. Novak Djokovic wants that to happen. I don't know if we'll ever see it, but workplace health and safety is clearly a very, very low priority. It will only be taken seriously when tournaments suffer financially or legally because of it. That's it. Capitalism is not ethical on its face. It needs to be ushered into the correct choice.
Tournaments need sponsors to survive. Tennis is a niche sport. That a tournament can be successful because of its sponsors is a good thing. But this is a step too far.
It's just dumb. So Kokkinakis tripped on it in the first round, and nobody thought to move it. I mean, because they're getting paid by that company, they probably can't move it based on some contract, right?
Zverev picked it up and threw it away.
Right.
So then there was still a gap between, I would say, an estimate of like 3 to 5 feet between where it was placed and the back of the court. You could push it back. It was never pushed back. Every day we saw somebody else having issues with it, and nothing was done. Where is it written that it had to be in that specific spot? I want to know if the advertiser had a contract that said it had to be at this specific spot.
Probably.
And if the Monte Carlo, the Rolex Masters failed to keep it in that spot, that they would then open themselves up to litigation. Is that how sinister and just disgusting this whole thing is? That players' safety can be compromised to such an obvious and severe extent based on some fine print in an advertiser's contract?
Yes. To answer your question, absolutely yes. Because I actually don't really think it's a consideration at all. It's not even sinister. It just is. Do you know what I mean? Like, companies the world over have to be forced into taking workplace health and safety seriously. And they have for centuries. We need laws in place to enforce workplace safety. Otherwise, companies have shown that they will not take it seriously because it doesn't make financial sense for them.
And if you work at a company, you know every time you go in the back room, there is a piece of paper there that has 2 or 3 employees and the manager's signatures saying this is our health and safety update.
That's because we have laws.
Well, yes, I'm agreeing with you. Tennis is... we've always lobbied that tennis should be treated as a traditional, non-traditional workplace.
Right.
Like, we should have the same rules overlap as much as possible when it comes to protecting employees. We can't have the powers that be and the advertisers and the tournaments running amok, lining their pockets while people are out here suffering injuries. And in the case of Kokkinakis, who's been oft injured, jeopardizing his career for what?
Right. Especially after, what was it? Was it last year when Goffin tripped over the tarp at
French
Roland
Open.
Garros? It looks bad. After Thanasi tripped, the things are still there. I'm like, are you serious? You have not moved it since then?
A quick run through of the Fed Cup action, because that was what was happening in women's tennis this past weekend. The Fed Cup final is going to be contested between perennial favorites, Czech Republic, and last year's winner, the United States of America.
Yeah. Czech Republic has won, I think, 6 times in the Petra Kvitova era. And she hasn't even played all those times. But she is just the best player in an incredibly deep lineup.
The Czech team beat Germany, as it turned out, pretty easily. It was thought to be the marquee matchup of the entire tournament this year, even with the final coming up. Like, this was the one.
Right.
Because you had Julia Gerges and Angelique Kerber competing against Pliskova and Kvitova.
Right, so you have top singles players facing off, but Petra Kvitova silenced the German team, basically. She made this tie fairly routine, beating Kerber and Gerges in straight sets. Julia Gerges got Germany's only point, beating Karolina Pliskova.
Kerber is going to have to turn around and play Kvitova in the first round of Stuttgart.
Oh my lord.
Like, if there was one tournament I have FOMO about this year, it's Stuttgart, because the matchups and the field is lit.
We have a Garcia Sharapova first round.
Mm-hmm. But what we saw this past weekend was so many of the top women turned out for Fed Cup. Very few took the weekend off. Simona Halep represented for Romania. We had the Australian team winning. Australia beat the Netherlands. Stamstoser, my word, was chosen by Alicia Malik to go in the first set of rubbers and lost her match in straight sets to somebody ranked outside the top 200. I watched her lose in Charleston. It was depressing. it wasn't for a lack of trying or will, but she wasn't able to do it in Charleston, and she wasn't able to do it on home soil in Fed Cup this time around, and she was overlooked for the return singles matches as well. Australia was able to get the job done. Canada, behind 2 singles wins from Jeannie Bouchard.
Yeah, over Tsurenko and Bondarenko of Ukraine. She was psyched to be there and to play for Canada. And that's the nicest thing I'll say about Jeannie.
She was asked she was given a compliment in her pre-Fed Cup press conference, and she made some quip about, it'd be nice if I got that kind of respect or acknowledgement from my local press. It's like, well, I don't really know what to say there, Jeannie.
I don't really know what more you want.
I don't know. We're years removed from your best now, Jeannie. This is the point where your results will dictate a lot. The matchup that I thought was gangbusters this weekend was Great Britain against Japan in Japan. And we had Kurumi Nara and Naomi Osaka as the 2 singles players for Japan, winning 1 match each. Naomi beat Heather Watson, and then Jo Konta beat Naomi. And Heather Watson lost both matches before Japan won their doubles match to secure the tie. The USA, they beat France. And Miss Sloane Stephens, she not only secured the bag, but she secured the tie.
She made up for her performance last fall in a big way. She beat Parmentier in a 3-set match and then just clotted Kiki Mladenovic.
Are we allowing you to speak patois and curse in Jamaican on the podcast?
Are you? I don't know.
Have we gotten to that point?
Are you going to censor that part?
I don't know. We shall see.
She destroyed Kiki Mladenovic. I think it was like 6-2, 6-love, right?
If you were following Mladenovic's social media, you'd have thought that she had just won 5 Olympic gold medals based on her output from that one singles match that she
beat
won.
Colleen.
She did.
And Colleen, as you know, was the Fed Cup hero at the end of last year. She led the USA to the title, basically.
So the USA is back in the final. Sloane Stephens, good for her.
Sloane is, she is in a form that should be feared, probably. Winning...
Probably.
No, but winning Miami, playing Fed Cup like this, I think her confidence is just ramping up. And, Sloane with confidence is very dangerous, as we saw at the US Open, at Miami.
We saw her win the US Open. We saw her struggle for quite a few months after that.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a Sloane who is more comfortable with being a big-time titleist and may not be cowed by big moments anymore. Won't go through a slump like she did the last time.
Right.
Maybe we've talked on this podcast about how all-encompassing her game is. And if she's ready to run with it, let's take a back seat and just watch.
I don't know why we keep getting called up by Sloane Hive, because I thought we had made peace. I thought we had signed the Treaty of Versailles. They just keep coming.
Specifically,
we were subtweeted by one of our closest friends.
Somebody who we've met in person. We shared drinks.
One of our closest Twitter friends subtweeted us today, and I was so disappointed.
It was
because, listen, don't come for me unless I send for you, and you were not sent for.
Twirl on that.
Like, we're really just over here minding our own damn business, being nice to Sloane, making peace, mending fences, and this happens.
You were sleeping and I saw it. And I DM'd you so you'd see when you wake up. I was like, the fuck is this?
Right. For once, like I said, I am bored of the fandom thing. I'm trying to stay out of it, and I'm trying to just speak truth in my life.
All right.
Darko Grncarov, you mentioned him.
This is a segment that I wanted to have because we were so kind to Mr. Darko in the wake of his exposure. When his mask was ripped off. When his wig was snatched. When the emperor was revealed to have no clothes.
The emperor? Or like the court jester?
The point is, like, Darko, you're out here exposed as fuck. Rather than be a little bit conciliatory or low-key, low-profile, you've decided to wheel and come again.
He's just ramped it up.
By stealing everybody's shit. Every single tweet that comes out of Darko Grncarov's fingers is plagiarized and stolen from a t-shirt that you can buy on Amazon.com.
And it's very obvious. Like, they're just sort of bland little jokes that you can find on, like, these massive Twitter accounts that, like, steal other people's jokes, you know?
And the one that really had me enraged and howling at the same time was when he tweeted, "I hate when websites ask, 'Are you human?' No, I'm a vacuum." Darko, newsflash. We do not know if you are a human. And if you are in fact human, we don't know who that human is, what he looks like.
Are you
to
Darko?
this day, we don't
Darko?
know what Darko looks like.
Well, he keeps posting pictures now. But I still don't know if that's really him. Or
He's
who is him?
He's posting them until he receives a cease and desist.
This is way existential. Because, like, who is Darko real? Is the person behind the Darko Twitter account actually that person who has an ITF profile?
But that's a good question. We don't know.
Will the real Darko please stand up? Please stand
my
up.
Lord. We were willing to get behind the idea of a Darko and what that Darko a few months ago represented. That Darko is lost at sea. We don't know. That Darko does not exist anymore. And while I refused to give in to this feeling of being duped, you know, or
is that out of pride? Being
told that, oh, well, y'all were stupid. Y'all were duped. I wasn't even concerned about that. I swear, I did not care about that at all.
Right.
But now, this is just many steps too far, Darko.
Like, he still has a check mark, right?
Yeah, and he has
but why?
60-something thousand followers on Twitter. I don't understand.
Well, he follows, like, almost as much, though.
Yes, but still, I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand who he is. I don't understand the people who have followed him and are still like, yes, girl, that's so funny.
And are those accounts all fake too? That's what understand. I don't. Are they bots? I don't understand.
This is what I'm saying. It's all a step too far for me. I just cannot. Je can't. At this point.
We've got to talk about this Caroline Wozniacki story that came from Simon Briggs. She opened up a bit about the incidents in Miami. James Blake, the tournament director of Miami, commented extensively on the situation on Tennis Nerd podcast, gave his side of the story, a kind of a more complete picture of what happened behind the scenes at Miami.
So absolutely go listen to that, because you need the full context to be able to really rightfully opine on this situation.
Caroline, what annoyed a lot of people, including myself, and I have to concede that I may have read into more than what was there. It seemed in the interview that she was comparing her experience in Miami to James Blake's experience with the NYPD. And again, I have to concede, if it was the writer who set up that analogy, then so be it.
There was definitely some editorializing with the way that article was written.
There was.
It was not good journalism, to be clear.
To be fair.
But listen, it says, he writes, Wozniacki's disappointment was only accentuated by the offhand response of the Miami Open's new director, James Blake. After Wozniacki posted a statement on social media detailing the abuse and calling on the tournament to, quote, take this seriously, Blake replied with a bland and apparently unconcerned statement saying that security and officials, quote, never witnessed nor were they notified of any specific threats made to players or their families. This is journalism 101. You do not say shit like, Blake replied with a bland and apparently unconcerned statement. Like, what is that?
Well, like UK and European journalism has different conventions as well, to be fair. Like, there is a lot more editorializing and more opinion in these kind of newsy stories, right? It's just a different way of doing journalism. Okay. So I don't want to discount that.
That's the paragraph that precedes Wozniacki's statement that says, the way that Miami was really not good, said Wozniacki. James Blake has been through these things himself, and I would have hoped that he would have had taken a stance, but he didn't, and that's that. I've just tried to forget the whole thing, but I think it was important that I spoke up and said something about it because I don't think it was okay. This issue is your quintessential multiple things are true. Don't you think?
It is, because we talked about extensively how this was not okay. It was horrible. Whatever Caroline experienced, what her family experienced, even what she perceived was going on, was not acceptable.
We saw a video of her talking to her dad on court, and they were obviously talking about what was going on in the stands.
And so, again, like, Caroline has complained to umpires before, but has never gone on about the crowd like this. Clearly something was afoot. So, in that case, I believe her. And no tennis player should have to endure that. Now, what I object to, even if it's implicit, is the comparison to James Blake's treatment by the NYPD, which is symptomatic of systemic and structural racism that black people experience in the United States. I don't expect Caroline to understand that, the history of that, but I expect a little sensitivity.
What we're hearing from James Blake on the Tennis Nerd podcast is that Caroline never made him and the tournament aware about the threats, the death threats, the abuse, all that nasty stuff that she and her family and her fiance's nieces experienced. Right? When we were very critical of James Blake and his statement on a previous podcast, saying it was not nearly enough because of what we were responding to as far as what Caroline put out there. Now we're hearing from James Blake as to what he said happened to him as a tournament director and how he was able to deal with things and what the contingencies were based on the information that was in front of him. And so stuff is not matching up, right? We're hearing one thing from Caroline, we're hearing one thing from James, and this is being fought in the court of public opinion. I'm always want to side with the aggrieved, and I still side with Caroline, and I do believe that that stuff happened. But this business of her, let's be frank, comparing what she went through to what James went through as a clearly racially motivated attack against the backdrop of what it's like to be a black man in America is not on. And it's, for my mind, a step too far. That's like a theme of this episode, I think. It's just a step too far.
And I have to say that I was inclined to think that this was true because I think back to Caroline's minstrel show performance when she did an impression of Serena Williams and stuffed her clothes and did this just really horrifying pantomime of a black woman.
Which has been largely forgotten.
Right. And I mean, again, like, Serena she kind of looked past it. They're friends. Like, I'm certainly not going to sit here and tell a black woman how she's supposed to respond to that sort of thing.
She didn't look past it.
It's none of my business.
She sanctioned it.
Right.
Yeah, and that's her want and that's her business.
I'm just saying, in these sort of incidents, like, I'm not going to forget it if Caroline's name comes up again.
This is the context.
Yeah.
Like, if you're using that, what James went through, as a horrifying thing. You're just minding your business outside of a hotel and people come, police, target you because they've mixed you up with another similarly looking black man. As similar as black people can look for white people. Mm-hmm. Right?
And we've gone through this before.
Yeah, and
it wasn't just an arrest.
No,
they
was
tackled him,
to the ground.
They humiliated him. Like
it was fucking awful. Against the context of everything that's happened in the last 5 years with police brutality against black people.
And it's the disproportionality applied to black people.
And then to casually say, well, I would think that because he's been through these things. What are these things?
And so the thing
is,
like,
what are these things?
I don't want people to take from this that, I think Caroline is racist. I think she is self-involved above everything. I don't think it's racism. I think it is completely 100% self-serving in every way.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yes.
Like, that's it.
And also being totally unaware. I mean, I say this, Lord, this is going to get me in trouble. But it's just not very smart. It's not street smart. It's not worldly smart. It's not being cultured. It's not like you are famous for being BFFs with one of the most visible black people in the world. But that is not cred for you to be able to make this leap to serve your own self-interest.
Yeah. I don't think that's controversial.
I just said she's not smart.
You said it was not smart.
Okay.
That maneuver was not smart. You didn't say she was not smart.
But it's this thing that keeps happening where there's so many truths that she can put forth, but there's this poison pill always.
Well, that's the thing. It's that she had the high ground.
She did.
You know,
like
she had.
This is like when you've been in battles before with people where stuff is murky, stuff is fraught, there multiple things are true. It's an antagonistic situation. And the moment you realize you have the higher ground on something, like you identify it, you are not ceding that. Mm-hmm. Like you cling to that for dear life. And she just wantonly, just brazenly threw it all away.
So at the risk of beating a dead horse here, I wanted to make clear, because I tweeted something that got a lot of play, but also got a lot of pushback from Caroline fans. And the distinction for me between Blake and Wozniacki is that Caroline had a horrible night. It was horrible.
We do not want to muddy that. We still believe that it was a horrible situation.
However, that is abusive, but I need to make the distinction between systemic abuse, systemic racism, and one person's terrible experience. They're not equivalent.
No, they're not.
They're simply not. And it's disappointing that she refuses to see that.
And I'm not even willing to get into the whole business of, well, James said this, she said that, James said this, she says that. I still believe her.
No, because I think we have to take James's statements with a grain of salt as well, because he is representing a tournament. And IMG is also the people who run that tournament.
And representing his own self-interest as a first-time tournament director.
Right. So he has other considerations. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that he's lying, but he
may be telling 100% the truth, and she may be telling 100% her truth. Those two things could be true. I can't say whether Caroline should have said this or done that or communicated better with the Miami Open, because I don't know what happened. So he says, she said at this point. We can only go with like the blatantly absurd things that have happened in its wake. Like I absolutely cannot believe that she would undercut her position like that by saying something like that.
Yeah.
And why it's also doubly disappointing, and also why I'm doubly less inclined to give her the benefit of the doubt with this statement, is because of her history with the minstrel show.
Yeah.
That shit is real. That is lived for black women all the time, historically speaking. And to have a white woman, perform Serena's physical attributes so extravagantly with that smile on her face.
Yeah.
It,
And then move on with her life without ever having to grapple with it.
Yeah.
This is what was really galling.
yeah.
Yeah.
And to not have to grapple with what she said in this interview as well. Like, it's just a casual, self-serving aside. Whereas the ramifications are so much greater for other people.
A Twitter mutual of ours, Hypotemuse, wrote a fascinating and very well-written story about John Isner, about politics, the alt-right, about the mainstreaming of far-right views. I highly recommend you check it out. We will link it in this episode. I just wanted to drop it in there.
And it's especially timely after John Wortham yet again equivocates on Tennis Sandgren in his Wednesday mailbag. Yet another disappointment. That's all we're going to say.
Moving on to greener pastures, we're going to end this episode
with Grownish. This is
Watch out, world, I'm grown now.
I'm grown. Learning something new every day.
The theme song is fire.
I could listen to it on loop. It's the best theme song. Whoever wrote that, give them the EGOT, all of them together.
Grownish is the spin-off of Blackish. If you don't know, Zoe got her own A Different World.
Yeah, and I'm surprised at how adult it is. Like,
They
did not shy away from making this young woman deal with grown-up shit.
It's very much like a Generation Z show. It's distinct from us, from millennials, and it's fairly open about college life. I think it is really like
and
it.
It also presents her as a character totally different from what we, totally different, but at the same time very similar to who we knew her as on Blackish. And it captures.
It's not Lisa Bonet.
No, but it captures the potential growth and the exposure that one does when you leave from being in the family nest to being on your own in college. I think it's very smart in that way.
So, all that smart stuff aside, you wanted to talk about something not smart.
Yeah, because this is one of the few shows where, given your limited 9-to-5 TV watching schedule, that you finished before me. So I just caught up over the weekend. And we wanted to, in the spirit of Dr. Scholes, we had this on the agenda before he went and called us out on Twitter. Right? So maybe we shouldn't go ahead. Just kidding. He's given us quite a few fuck, marry, kills in the past with respect to tennis players, and we're going to do one for the suitors of Zoe on Grownish. Being Aaron, who is the kind of
well, he is like woke, the militant woke bae.
Yeah, but still has a rat tail and dresses like a douchebag.
Yeah, what is the rat tail? Is back? Is it back?
It's back on him. That's it. Luca, who is your emo, artistic...
Jaden Smith.
Yes, but very smart. And, you know, treats Zoe well intellectually, I think.
Okay. And Cash, who is the basketball superstar.
Yeah, who is about to be drafted, maybe go number 1 and be a superstar.
I'm having trouble. Have you figured out your rankings?
It was so easy for me.
Fuck, marry, kill. Okay. Go on.
I would kill both Aaron and Cash. And
you can't. That's cheating.
Okay, fine. I would... Well, you know, this presupposes that marrying is the goal. This is the inherent problem with this.
They did one on the show, too.
They did, in the finale. I want nothing to do with Cash. Zoe... If I'm Zoe... If I'm me, where I'm broke and don't got no money, I might just marry and fuck Cash. Because that payday might be worth something.
Yes.
But Zoe don't need that money. So I would kill Cash. Now, you don't need none of that life, right? Then I guess I would fuck Aaron.
Okay.
Because I guess he's hot if you were to reform the aesthetics of it. Like the rat tail notwithstanding. She's also made herself very clearly interested in him from episode 1.
Yeah.
And he has not brought her or carried her anywhere. And now he's coming with the sub story in the finale that, oh, you know, I was such an idiot. I didn't know how to express myself. Like, dude, you are not a freshman in college. Well, he's at least a sophomore, right? Sophomore, junior. You're this big guy on campus. Like, if you want to be with this girl, you let her know. Like, stop acting a fool. Like, I'm not here for that. And for my mind, I would marry Luca because Luca, they share something in common, which is very important. They're both into fashion. He challenges her, both professionally and intellectually, because Zoe needs a lot of challenging. Like, she grew up with Dre as her father.
And she's extremely privileged.
Yeah. And so their clash of worlds is something that's utile for her in her growth in this very specific time in her life. And yes, Luca has lots of problems with him. Like, he's very snobbish. He thinks he's better than people, which I'm sure you can relate to.
Oh my, what the fuck? Again, I'm just sitting over here minding my own business.
And I don't care for the grooming of the facial hair, but I like his aesthetic. I like his swag. I like that he can potentially get over himself to be there emotionally for Zoe. I think so.
Okay, you have talked enough. I would fuck Cash for obvious reasons. I would kill Luca, the one you married. You married him?
I married him.
No, I would
sure
kill
did.
him. He's pretentious. He's annoying. I would just get so tired of it. I could not spend a lifetime with him.
He could paint murals of my face all over the walls.
No. And I would marry Aaron because I have a soft spot for, like, better dead than red. Left wing. He's incensed. He's angry about a lot of things. His politics are not entirely formed yet. He has, like, those Hotep tendencies, which I don't like.
When you say
But
entirely formed, his politics aren't entirely formed, do you mean they're performative?
Sure.
Which, I'm not about that life.
No, but I think he has a lot of beliefs that he doesn't know how to put together quite yet.
Also wrapped up with a lot of dude broness.
That's what I'm saying. Those tendencies I don't like, but I'm all about, like, a Black Trotsky. I'd be down with it.
I think you gave him way too much credit.
I'm just saying, the alternatives are not that great.
So you don't find Luca cute at all?
No.
Not at all?
Not at all. With his wispy facial hair, I'm just not into it.
Lord.
Now,
this is one of the few things we've so greatly disagreed on this podcast.
Do one with Riverdale, and I think we would disagree again.
Oh, let's do it right now.
Oh.
Yes, do it. Archie, Reggie, and
Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Marry Kevin. That's easy. He can sing. He outshines these mediocre straight people at every turn, but doesn't get the credit. I'm with it. Fuck Reggie. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts. Follow him on Instagram for real. Like, you're welcome. And Archie can just dead. Archie can't sing. He is...
Can't act. He certainly can't act.
He's a brown shirt. He's part of the private militia of this organized crime boss who broke up a protest. Fuck Archie. Like, Archie is dead to me. He's a fascist. Bye. And I don't want to hear his terrible singing ever again.
Are we were supposed to disagree on this?
Oh.
I do not disagree with you at all. I'm just still I'm
okay.
still here thinking about Reggie. That's all.
On that note, shall we?
Yes. Thanks for listening. To the folks who've given us reviews on iTunes lately, thank you so much. To the folks who've reached out via Twitter, email, again, thank you so much. Those interactions mean everything to us. We encourage them, we solicit them. Email us at thebodyserve@gmail.com if you do not have Twitter, because we've come to the realization that not everybody uses Twitter, which is fine. Email us, let us know what you think of the show, suggestions, all that stuff. I'm on Twitter at tennis_John.
I'm at ElliotJMR.
2 L's, 2 T's. The podcast is at The Body Serve on Twitter. Same on Instagram. Till next time.